Hi, this is Kelly from Freebie Finding Mom, and today I'm going to share with you one of my favorite Thanksgiving recipes. It's a recipe for a marbled pumpkin cheesecake. It's a pretty simple recipe to make, and it's a really good variation from a pumpkin pie. So even if you do have a pie at your Thanksgiving, or if you choose not to, this is a really good alternative for those of you who just want to try a different dessert on your dessert table this holiday. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started making our marbled pumpkin cheesecake. So we're going to start first with our crust. I think you can see, yeah, that's a pretty good view. We're going to start first with our crust, and our crust is really simple. It's just crushed gingersnap cookies, which I did last night, about 1.5 cups. It is also about 1/2 cup of chopped up pecans, and about 1/3 cup of melted butter. We have to melt our butter. You're going to combine all of that, and you're going to put it in the bottom of a springform pan for your crust. So we're going to go ahead and get started doing that, and then we'll make our filling for our marbled pumpkin cheesecake. That's a pretty good view. I think you can see that pretty good. All right, so let's go ahead and put in our 1.5 cups of our gingersnap cookies. Dump those in. And then, like I said, I wanted to save some time this morning, so I went ahead and I chopped up my pecans in addition to crushing up my cookies. So I've got 1/2 cup of chopped pecans going in as well. And I'm going to just melt my 1/3 cup of butter, and then we're going to combine that. So I'll be right back and melt that for you. While that is melting, I want to also mention that I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees. And like I said, if you've never made a cheesecake, I will say, I've been making this for years, but I will say I was pretty intimidated at the thought of making a cheesecake because it sounds really complicated. But I assure you, this recipe is really not hard at all. Let me just get my melted butter. I'll be right back. But this recipe, like I said, is not complicated whatsoever, and it's incredibly delicious. It's funny because I found this recipe years ago, actually, and you know, at first I was like, I can't not make pumpkin pie. Why would you want a pumpkin cheesecake? But my husband, who is not a big sweets person whatsoever, actually, this is probably, I would say, one of his favorite desserts that I make for him. And because yes, it's sweet, but it doesn't have like a lot of icing, of course, the cheesecake. So and pumpkin pie obviously is delicious, but sometimes, like I said, if you ever go to like multiple Thanksgiving parties, sometimes you're like, okay, well, I had pumpkin pie at the first 2 parties, now can I have a little something different? So that's why I like to make this pumpkin cheesecake, because it's just, you know, it still has the pumpkin flavor, you still get the feel of it being Thanksgiving, but yet you're not eating another piece of pumpkin pie. So in here, like I said, if you just joined us, in here is 1/3 cup of melted butter that I just added. We've got 1.5 cups of crushed gingersnap cookies and 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. This is our crust, basically. So I'll finish just combining this real quick, and then we're going to push it in the bottom of our springform pan. And it's a really delicious crust. I think that looks pretty incorporated. I'll bring this closer. So this is basically the bottom for our crust, for our marbled pumpkin cheesecake. That's the other thing is, it really has a nice presentation too when this cheesecake is all finished, just because of the marbling on the top. Looks really nice. All right, I've got my springform pan. I'm sure I didn't forget to tell you something. Nope, in here 1.5 cups of our gingersnap cookies. We've also added 1/2 cup of the finely chopped pecans and 1/3 cup of the melted butter. And like I said, we're already preheating our oven to 350 degrees. And then next, what we're going to do is, like I said, go ahead and push that into the bottom of our pan. We're just using a standard 9-inch springform pan. And then we'll bake that for 10 minutes, our crust that is. And then while that's baking, we're gonna go ahead and start the filling. You can see that angle. Yep, that's pretty good. So I think we incorporated that pretty well. Since I made a cheesecake last night, because I wanted to have a finished version to show you, I went ahead and I'm making this version actually for my son's teachers. So they are having parent conferences coming up and asked for volunteers to bring food. So I thought, let's whip up another cheesecake. Hopefully they love it. There's that. You can see that pretty well, right? Yeah. Smells so good. Nothing like butter and cookies and pecans. Looks like I've got a cookie that needs a little more crushing up. And when it comes to crushing up your ginger snap cookies, obviously there's no perfect way to do it. You know, if you want to put it in a blender or something like that, great. I use like a potato masher to mash my ginger snap cookies in just a plastic bag last night. But you do what works for you. That is one of the tasks that my son actually enjoys doing, is the crushing up of the cookies. So right now, like I said, we're just making our crust here in the bottom of our 9-inch springform pan. And that's all it was just butter, crushed up ginger snap cookies, and finely chopped pecans. That was it. Now I'm just going to use my hand to get in here and you're going to want to push it up the sides of your pan a little bit, about an inch to a half an inch up the sides. Just make sure it's packed in there. You have no spots open. And just kind of press it down a little bit here. And I'll show you here a little bit closer up once I get the way that I want it. Yummy. And the filling is super simple as well. It's really simple. And it's a pretty inexpensive recipe, because nuts can be something that can be kind of pricey, but you only need half a cup of them, so it's not too much. Ginger snap cookies were not expensive. Pumpkin filling, you're probably going to buy it for other recipes anyways, and you only need a cup of it in this recipe. So, and a lot of the other ingredients you probably already have. Okay, so there is our crust. And I will make sure that I have it fairly even across. Considering I'm doing it kind of quickly. There we go. Okay. Let me wash my hands and I'll do a closer up for you. All right. Smells so good. Let me check the temperature of my oven too, because it needs to be at 350 degrees to put this crust in. All right, I'm at 318, so it's about time for that. So here is a close-up of my crust for my pumpkin cheesecake. As I said, this is just a half a cup of finely chopped pecans. It was a third a cup of butter, and then just 1.5 cups of our crushed ginger snap cookies. So I'm gonna set that aside here, because we're gonna start to make the pie filling, or the pumpkin filling for the top of our cheesecake. And that we'll be incorporating that nicely while we wait for this to bake in the oven for 10 minutes. Put this away. I'm going to check and see if I have any comments. If you will, for joining us this morning, leave a comment. Let me know kind of what are you excited about making this holiday season. Leave a comment. I'd love to read what you're thinking. All right, I set that aside. I'm just going to go ahead and get started on our filling now. Let me grab my other bowl. There's that. And we're still waiting on our oven. I should have preheated that probably a little bit earlier. That's all right. Now what we're going to start with, 2 8-ounce containers of softened cream cheese. This is the yummy part. Or one of them. Softened cream cheese. We're going to just pop it in the microwave actually for a little bit to help kind of soften it along. Unfortunately, this morning my little taste tester is just left for soccer practice, so he won't get to show you how incredibly delicious this recipe is, but I assure you it is. I make this recipe, I would say, every Thanksgiving. I can't think of one here recently that I haven't made this. I believe for sure I made it last year. Yeah, because it is one of my husband's favorite dessert recipes. Because like I say, he's not a real sweets person, but this just has a nice balance. It's not really too sweet. Let's pop in our other one. Such a good alternative to pumpkin pie, which I still love. You know, it's funny, last year we had pumpkin pie in addition to this pumpkin cheesecake. And I thought, oh, I'll find out which dessert my son and my husband like the most, and I'll know which one to make. Because quite honestly, I can eat anything. It doesn't really upset me. Because when it comes to desserts, I can pretty much like it all. So with that being said, my husband was like, no, I really like the pumpkin cheesecake the most. I'm like, oh, okay. And then my son was like, no, I really like pumpkin pie the most. I'm like, okay, so I'm pretty much not going to get out of making both of those for some time anyways. So that's all right. Awesome, our oven is done. So we can go ahead and pop in our cheesecake crust and get that in there for about 10 minutes. Put that in real quick, and then we'll soften up our cream cheese. Let me move that rack down. There we go. Doing, I'll just let you know, I was moving my rack down in the oven because last night when I made my the one cheesecake version last night, I had it on a little higher rack than what I probably would have wanted. I just wasn't watching it as much as I usually would because I was just making it for my family and to have a final version to show you. So I was just moving the rack down in the oven. So just watch it because otherwise your top of your cheesecake could get a little bit brown. It'll still taste delicious, but it could get a little bit brown on you. So now we're going to go ahead and soften up our 2 8-ounce containers of cream cheese. And while that is softening, I'll just run through the remaining ingredients. What I'll say too is when this video is done, I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the post that's on Freebie Finding Mom, so you can go ahead and see the full recipe over there, along with the directions, ingredients, and step-by-step photos. So after the video, feel free to hop on over there when I put the link down. So in this pie, I keep saying pie filling, but in the cheesecake topping, what you're going to put in is your cream cheese, your white sugar. You're also going to have some vanilla extract, 3 eggs, and canned pumpkin, cinnamon, and nutmeg, and that's it. So it's a pretty simple recipe, not too complicated. So with our 2 8-ounce containers of cream cheese that have softened, I'm going to grab that right now. That's softened a little bit. I just popped it in the microwave for about 45 seconds or so. It's just softened up a little. Now feel free to use a hand mixer at this point or to use a stand mixer. I sometimes will use my stand mixer. Today I'm going to do it by hand. That's what I did last night as well. So now to that I'm going to add half of a cup of sugar. And I say it like that because the total recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of white sugar, but you're only going to put a half of a cup in right now. You'll put the remaining cup in towards the end. I told you, yep, half a cup of sugar. All right. There's that. That's right. And just for video purposes, to expedite the process, what I'm going to do is when I take our crust out of the oven, it's going to have to cool before we, let me take this off. It's going to have to cool before we put our filling on top of it. But just to expedite it, I'm actually going to probably pop it in the freezer. But normally I would just let it cool on the countertop, basically. There's 1/4 of a cup. And there's another 1/4 of a cup. So there's our half a cup of sugar. Right there. And then next to that, 2 containers of the cream cheese, half a cup of sugar, we're going to add our teaspoon of vanilla extract. Such a good recipe. And like I said, it's really not that expensive. It does incorporate nuts, which can get expensive, but that and your cream cheese, I bought 4 containers yesterday of cream cheese at my grocery store. It was 4 for $5, and not even including a coupon, so it's not bad. And you're probably, like I said, gonna buy pumpkin filling anyways for some recipes, and you only need a cup, so you'll have plenty left over if you buy one of these bigger containers like I did, these larger containers. Okay, so let's make sure. So in here we have our 2 containers of cream cheese, our ½ cup of sugar, and then our teaspoon of vanilla. We're just gonna mix that together until it's smooth, and then once it's smooth, we're going to, I probably could have left that in the microwave a little bit longer. Once it's smooth, we're gonna add our eggs, 1 egg at a time. We're using a total of 3 eggs. And like I said, I've made this recipe where I've stirred it by hand. I've made this recipe where I've used my hand mixer. I've used a stand mixer, but today I decided I'm gonna do it by hand today. And then we'll start to incorporate our 3 eggs. So good. My son, as he was leaving for soccer this morning, he was disappointed because he wanted to taste this. He said, your taste tester's not here. And I said, I know, but I have to get this video in today because I thought if you guys were looking for Thanksgiving recipes, I wanted to be able to get this one to you as soon as possible. And like I said, if you want, you can hop on over to Freebie Finding Mom and you'll see the recipe there. I put it up a couple of days ago for Marbled Pumpkin Cheesecake. So in here, if you're just joined, we're just mixing in our 2 containers of cream cheese that we've softened up a bit, along with a ½ cup of white granulated sugar, in addition to our teaspoon of vanilla. And that's all that's in here right now. You can see that. Now we're going to add 1 egg at a time. We're going to have a total of 3 eggs. And in the oven is still our crust, which is baking up. I encourage you to try this cheesecake recipe because it's just a nice alternative. It's always nice to kind of try to find a new recipe at the holidays and people be like, wow, what is that? I want to know what that is. So it's always fun to try something different. The holidays, you're allowed to eat whatever you want. So that's my motto. Yep, 1 egg at a time, blending well. I only make this recipe during Thanksgiving time, so I have to kind of check it. There we go. Let's add 1 more egg now. I will say I wasn't sure how much of gingersnap cookies to buy. Like I bought a box of them yesterday. And so, actually I bought 2 boxes. I only needed the 1. So, and that made 2 cheesecakes. So if you're wondering, let me see if I still have that box. It'll help you. Looks like the recycling went out already. But I just bought a standard box of gingersnap cookies, and it was the perfect amount for 2 full cheesecakes. So if you're wondering, you know, it's always hard to eyeball things when you have to crush them. And so if you're wondering, I bought just a normal size box of gingersnap cookies, and it made 2 cheesecake. It was enough for 2 cheesecake crust. So just to hope that helps. And now our last egg, our 3rd egg goes in. There we go. I'm so glad I was able to get this recipe on the blog this week because I really hope you give it a try, because when I discovered this years ago, I thought, gosh, that's such a good recipe that I want to make that a tradition, and we have. We've been making it, honestly, I've probably made it for the last 5-6 years, if not more, now that I think about it. So, I don't know, it's always fun to find some new recipes that you can make your own, especially if you are just kind of starting to host the holidays. Then, you know, it's always nice to have the staples that your family's expecting, but at the same time, it's always nice to kind of put your own touch on your dinner and have some things that are just special to your specific dinner. Okay, so in here, we've combined our cream cheese. We've added a ½ cup of white sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 3 eggs. Now, next what we're gonna do is we're gonna set aside 1 cup of this mixture. We're gonna set a cup of it aside, and that's what we're going to put on top of our cheesecake. Once we've added our pumpkin filling, we're gonna put that on top by spoonfuls, and that's what you swirl around to make the marbling effect. So I think we've got that fairly smooth, and then if you've got a few bumps, it's no problem because they'll bake out in the oven. Let me put my egg shells aside. All right, so we're just gonna save about a cup of this and put this aside. Let me rinse this out. I'll put it right in this bowl. You know, I was intimidated when I saw this recipe. I'm like, how do you make a marbling effect? That sounds complicated. It's not at all, and you'll see what I mean. It's literally just dropping spoonfuls of this mixture together on top of it and using your knife to go around it. So it's not complicated. So here we're just gonna take about a cup of our filling that we just mixed together, and we're just gonna set it aside. And that was the beep was of my oven, so that means I've got about a minute left in my crust, which is perfect. So we just set aside about a cup of that, but we'll use that, like I said, at the top, at the very end, as a topping. There's that. Okay. So next we're just going to add in our spices, cinnamon and nutmeg, in addition to our pumpkin. That's it, right? Yep. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna blend in, we have to put the remaining quarter of a cup of sugar in, and then our pumpkin, cinnamon, and nutmeg. And that is it. And I better get my hot pads ready for my, because that oven's gonna beep here soon. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get our quarter of a cup of our white sugar and adding that in. Quarter of a cup of white sugar. Let me take out my crust real quick. I hear ya. Yummy. All right. I will show you this crust here real quick. This is our baked crust, just came out of the oven. It was in the oven for 10 minutes. And just like I said, I would normally, to let this cool before you put your filling on top, I would normally just let it cool on the kitchen countertop. But for video purposes, to kind of expedite this process, I'm gonna just pop it in the refrigerator actually, and I try to cool it down a little bit faster. So let me do that real quick. So that is in there cooling down, and we've added here to our mixture another quarter of a cup of sugar. And then we're gonna add, I believe it's 3/4 of a teaspoon of our cinnamon. Three-quarters of a teaspoon of the cinnamon, yep. 1, 2, and 3 cinnamon. And then we're gonna do, I think it's quarter nutmeg, right? Yep, a quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Quarter of a teaspoon of nutmeg. And our pumpkin. And we just need a cup of our pumpkin. Getting that off real quick. You'll see, like I said, if you want to hop over to Freebie Finding Mom and see the full recipe, you'll see step-by-step of pictures of this recipe as well. But I always love to see videos of things, to be honest with you, because I'm a visual person, it just helps me so much. So much more. All right, so we did that. We had our eggs. So we just need a cup of our canned pumpkin because we've already added our 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon and our 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. So let's get our cup of pumpkin. I love pumpkin. It is one of those things one of those foods that I love to figure out how many ways I can use it, either in pies, in cheesecakes, in bread. I just love pumpkin. Year round, to be honest, but definitely in the fall time. You know what I really want to make? For a long time I've been wanting to. I see them on Pinterest and every time I see them, I'm like, I have to make those. I really want to make pumpkin cookies that are iced. I've seen them, I love them. I haven't had them in years, but I've never made like a pumpkin iced cookie and they just look so good. Like I said, I keep seeing them all over Pinterest and I'm like, I need to make those. All right. Got a cup of our canned pumpkin. Go ahead and add that in. There we go. And then that's all our ingredients right there. That is it. Right, yes, we used our cookies, our pecans, and our butter, and cream cheese, all our sugars in there, our vanilla we did, 3 eggs, cup of the pumpkin, and we put in 3/4 teaspoon cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Mix this together, and I'll bring this closer to the screen and get this mixed. It already has a nice little marbling effect here. It smells so good, all the nutmeg and the cinnamon together, along with the pumpkin, it just smells so good. And like I said, it's still very holiday because of the pumpkin in it, so if you feel like, oh, we still have to have pumpkin pie. Well, you can of course still make a pumpkin pie, but if you're kind of looking for a different dessert this year, I really honestly encourage you to try this because I can't imagine who wouldn't like it. It's so good. We've already had our oven preheated to 350 degrees because, as you know, we baked our crust in there. So we just left it at 350 degrees. Okay, that's mixed together well. And yeah, spread that on top of the crust, drop the plain butter, and that's it. Okay, so we're gonna check on our crust. Like I said, it says to let the crust cool. Let me move this closer so you can see. This is our filling. Hopefully you can see that pretty well, hopefully. Okay. And like I said, if you have a few little bumps in there, that's totally fine because it'll bake through. What they say is to let the crust cool, and I always let it usually go by room temperature. But today, just for the video purposes, I just popped it in the refrigerator to kind of let it cool faster. So I'm going to get that out of the fridge just to see if it's cooled down a bit. And then we can put our filling on top of it. Cool down some. I think this will work. It's still a little bit warm. But like I said, I just want to be able to keep the video going for you. So we're going to go ahead and pour this on top. Oh, yummy, yummy. Pour our filling on top. I'm going to move this over so you can see that a little bit better, hopefully right there. Yeah, right there. Move my bowl so maybe you can see that better. There we go. And as you probably remember, we set aside about a cup of our filling before we added the pumpkin and the spices. So then that is what we will drop on top of this, and that is what will make the marbling effect. You simply use your knife to make the marbling effect. And it's funny because, like I said earlier, I saw this recipe, the pictures initially online years ago, and I was like, wow, marbling, that looks so nice. And I thought that'd look really pretty on my Thanksgiving table, but how do you even make that marbling effect? I was pretty intimidated just looking at the picture. But then once I read the directions, I was like, I think I can actually do that maybe. So it wasn't as tricky as I thought it was going to be. Love recipes like that. Not the opposite, where they look easy and then you try them and you're like, whoa, not so easy. Okay. So in there, we have our filling has been added on top. You know what? I'm going to bake this on a large sheet just to make it easier to get in and out of the oven. So I'm going to put this just on top of this sheet, just like that. There we go. So now we're just going to, drop by spoonfuls of our plain batter that we set aside and saved. That was our 1 cup that we set aside earlier that we saved. And we're going to drop it by spoonfuls on top. You use a knife to make a swirling effect, and that's it. And that is it. Grab a spoon. And I do have a final version that I made last evening that I can show you. Just like I said, unfortunately my taste tester is at soccer this morning, so he was kind of bummed he wasn't going to get to eat this on camera. He even said it as he was putting his shoes on this morning. He said, "Your taste tester's not here today." I said, "I know, but I need to get this recipe out because I want people to be able to make it for Thanksgiving." So like I said, you'll find the Marbled Pumpkin Cheesecake should be on the homepage still on Freebie Finding Mom. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just dropping by spoonfuls this plain batter, and I'll bring this closer to the screen so you can see it even better. And I'm just dropping them all over, just kind of randomly. There's no right or wrong, just do what works for you. I love recipes like that, where it just looks good no matter what you do really, because it's whatever you want. It'll still taste incredibly delicious, I assure you of that. And this was just a cup. There we go. It's pretty good. Get all this goodness out. And drop it right there. And now I'm going to use my knife to swirl it, make the marbling effect. And now, like I said, there's no right or wrong. You just kind of drag it through however you want. And it's going to look marbled either way. And I wondered after I baked it, the first time I made it, I was like, is the marbling still going to show even after baking? And it does. Just kind of drag it through. Have a little fun with it. And I'll pull it closer to the screen here so you can see mine at the very end. I like the idea, like I said, of just taking all it was just using the plain, batter before you added the spices and the pumpkin on top. And I'll pull this closer so you can see. Actually, I'll pick this whole thing up here. This is our Marbled Pumpkin Cheesecake that's going to go in the oven now. And I will, like I say, show you the finished version here in a second. So with that being said, we have our oven preheated at 350 degrees. I'm going to put it in. It's going to take about 55 minutes to bake. Just check it after maybe 50 minutes and just see whenever the filling basically looks set. And I will put this in now. Finished pumpkin cheesecake that I made last night. I let the top get a little browner than I really would have liked, honestly. That's because I had it on a rack that I should have moved it down one. But I assure you it will still taste delicious. And with that being said, for those of you who just joined, I want to make sure that you understand how simple this recipe really is. So all that was this, the crust was just a gingersnap cookie crust with some crushed up pecans and some melted butter. The topping was simply about a cup of pumpkin, used a little bit of nutmeg and cinnamon, along with some sugar and cream cheese and vanilla. I think that was it. And 3 eggs, and that was all. With that being said, as you can see, this Marbled Pumpkin Cheesecake is pretty simple to make. I hope you give it a try this Thanksgiving, and your family will enjoy it. With that being said, I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, and thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.